Well, I've had this old air compressor sitting in the corner of the shop. Well, not quite the corner, but it's been sitting over there for probably a year or two now. And this is I don't know if this is a homemade compressor or what. I know the angle iron, cast iron, or the angle iron casters or whatever, that's homemade. But the rest of this is an interesting looking compressor, to say the least. It has these ends on them. There's one there, and there's one there. I don't know if this maybe was a vertical air compressor at one point. I'm not really sure. But it has two quick disconnects, one straight from the tank and one right from the regulator. So that's regulated pressure there. This is a dual cylinder air compressor. This is a pressure switch, I think, something like that. And this is the motor. Those are the two capacitors. There is no cover for those, and you know, this thing will slide and whatnot to tension the belts. It's a 2-belt compressor, and this thing is it seems to be pretty well made. So this motor, there's something wrong with this motor. I'm not really sure. I think it's just old and it needs replaced. It either has a dead spot in it, or it didn't want to start up. And I don't know, you'd have to mess with this thing. And I just said, you know what, I'm done dealing with this. So I went over to my favorite store, Harbor Freight, and bought one of these Smith & Jones. This is a 2-horsepower compressor duty, 1800 RPMs, stationary air compressors, pumps, conveyors, fans, blowers, coolers, a dual capacitor for faster startup and smooth, efficient running, reversible, which is good, and an open drip-proof enclosure. So I guess you could get water on the top of this thing and it wouldn't hurt it, but it's not good to do that anyways. 115 and 230, 60 hertz, single phase, 1800 RPMs, a NEMA frame of 145 and a 7/8 inch Harbor. So I'm going to put this thing on this compressor. It'd be nice if it was green, but maybe after I get out of the 90-day warranty, I will paint this thing the same color green as this. As you can tell, I have quite a lot of spray paint and stuff in here, so I should be able to find something that will work to paint this. And actually, is it this can? Maybe too light, but I have a whole bunch of other spray paint in here. So well, let's get started taking off this old motor, and I'm sure I'm gonna have to fight with this pulley. Looking at this thing, I might be able to press this off. We bought a press from Harbor Freight also, and you can adjust this here with these bolts. You know, this is a pretty good compressor, pretty well made. And I'm also, I want to put the new motor on, get this old one off, put the new one on. And then I did this to my brother's compressor. He has another one just like this with a massive, absolutely massive pump on it. It's a single pump, but it must come up to here. It is, I bet the pump alone weighs, oh my goodness, probably 75 pounds. But I want to make this thing easy to pick up, and I have some of these. I think they're 3/8 maybe, something like that. But I want to weld these, find where the center point is. So I have the crane out there, and I'll pick this thing up. I'll try to mark right just about exactly where the center point is on this, and then we'll weld one there, and then I'll weld another one over here. It should not interfere with the belts. It's kind of close, but I don't really think that that's going to be an issue. But you know, you can hook into here, but you know, it'll slide and it'll go over to one side, and this keeps it, you know, centered. So well, let's get started taking this old motor off. And no, I actually probably have to pull this out and undo this wire also. So we'll have to do a little bit of electrical stuff, so let's get started. I've got to say, repowering this air compressor really wasn't that bad. The motor for this air compressor, the new one from Harbor Freight, I think it set me back $133 and change, or $131 and change. Normally it is 160 some, I think it's $169, something like that. And for anyone that doesn't know, on the electric motors, you can apply a 20 or 25% off coupon. So I decided to definitely use one of those, and it brought the price down like 30 or 35 or $40, something like that. So just an FYI there. And the cashier that I went to, she said, "Oh, you can't use a 20% off on these." And before I went in there to purchase this thing, I wanted to double check that a 20% off could be used on this. So I read the fine print on the coupon, and there was no mention of the Smith & Jones name on this motor. So I figured I could use a 20% off on this thing, and sure enough, I could. So now I'm just unbolting this old thing, this old motor, and I've got to say, taking this thing off, it seems pretty simple enough. Work the belts off and just loosen up 4 bolts, and it should come right off. However, the way this motor mounts, they should have used carriage bolts to mount this motor to the compressor, but they didn't. They just used a regular bolt, and the bolt on the bottom side would just keep spinning. So I really kind of had to put a wrench way up in underneath there, and it uh, it took more time than I thought it should have. But I got it off, and unfortunately, I had to cut the shaft off of the old one to get this pulley off. I was not about to spend, I don't know, $40 for a cast iron pulley, or I don't know how much it would be. It was just more money that I just didn't want to spend. And we that was the Harbor Freight press that my brother bought to press off the carrier bearing on his truck. So having a press around here is super nice. It's not something we use every day, but man, when you need it, oh, is it nice to have. So now I just have the motor, I guess, mounted up already, and what I'm doing is putting the old pulley on the shaft, and I made sure that I used Never Sees a lot on this thing. I just didn't want this thing seizing on here again. I would prefer not to use a press to take pulleys off of motors and stuff. I'd much rather just loosen up the bolt or the set screws and just pull it right off. But I got the pulley on. This motor did come with a keyway, so we kind of lucked out there with that, and I was very happy to see that. And pretty much just slide the pulley on, tighten the set screws, and now we can mount this motor. We were able to, or I was able to use the old belts, and this motor did mount up exactly perfect to the mounting points on this air compressor. So that NEMA, I forget the number, that's what this is for a 2 horsepower, and I just replaced it with the same horsepower motor, and it's just brand new. So this thing should work fine. I shouldn't have any problems with it in the future. Although you guys will see later in the video, I do have some other problems with this compressor. Well, it's not really with the compressor, it's what's powering the compressor. But anyways, I'm just tightening up these bolts, and I am probably going to be tensioning the belt here pretty soon. But I've got to say, this old compressor, this thing seems to be pretty well made. Everything seems pretty darn heavy on it. There's no way I can pick up this thing myself. don't really know how much it weighs, but it's pretty darn heavy. I'm gonna guess maybe probably 150 pounds, maybe. I don't think it weighs 200, but that big cast iron or stamped steel or cast steel flywheel that is on that compressor itself, that thing weighs a ton. The compressor, because of that, there's more weight on the one side and it tips a lot easier. So I'm just tightening the bolts and stuff down. I do want to do a oil change on this, on the compressor part itself. I don't know when the last time that was changed, and it's just a good habit to get into. So now what I'm doing here is I am trying to find the center point on this thing. All I used was, I just took a ratchet strap and wrapped it around both sides of this thing and just hooked it up to the crane and then picked it up with the crane. And then that allowed me to pretty much get an almost exact center point or balance point, I guess, for this compressor. Obviously, I wanted to do this with the new motor on, and I've got to say it'll be nice to have this compressor going, and it'll work. It's not just sitting in the shop doing or just collecting dust. As you can see, it is pretty dusty, and maybe at some point I'll pressure wash this thing to clean it up. But I cleaned the steel on this compressor itself on the mounting plate there, and all I'm just doing is tacking this in place, and then I'll fully weld it. So let's see, we've got a Harbor Freight motor, a Harbor Freight gloves, Harbor Freight welding helmet, the pickup truck cranes from there, my tool carts from there. So there's a lot of stuff from Harbor Freight in these videos, it seems like. But yeah, I'm just putting the ground clamp on and really getting ready to fully weld these things. And I know a lot of people don't think that I'm that great of a welder, but really nothing, or everything that I've welded, nothing's really cracked. If I'm using the proper wire and stuff, I haven't really had any problems with anything that I've welded. Knock on wood. Now that I said that, I'll probably have a problem or something. But really, these lifting points, they're not something I've... See if I used them one time yet. I don't even know that I've used them one time yet, but they're there if I need them, whenever I need them to move this compressor, to another building, or we have to run it off a generator somewhere else. So I'm really glad I did that. I finished welding up the lifting points on this old compressor. I don't know how old this thing is, but here it is, suspended. There's nothing holding it other than the crane there. So I know you're not supposed to lift stuff with a ratchet strap. I understand that. Whenever I move this thing, I'll use a chain, and plus it's on rollers, which is nice. So these are my welds. They are not the best, and I know that, and that is okay, because I'm not a professional welder, and this is an old air compressor that I don't want to say I don't care about, but it's not a brand new one. So but there you go. It's holding just fine. I don't think these things will ever come off. And yeah, this steel here is it's probably at least an eighth, probably 3/16, so pretty much maxed out what the Harbor Freight welder can weld. I don't think those things will ever come off unless I have to cut them off for some reason. So my brother got the air compressor finished up. It's all wired up and it does work. However, I'm still running into the same problem here that I am with bigger welders and stuff. For one, you don't have 220 volt power, and I only have a 20 amp service coming to this building, and this air compressor draws all of those 20 amps. So unfortunately, I can't really run this air compressor in here. It'll pump up the first time and maybe the second, but after that it just blows the breaker. So this motor is rated, I don't know if you guys can read this or not. So it's on 120 volt power. It's a 2 horsepower. And there's all the specs and stuff of it. There's the wiring diagram. So I will probably, whenever I get my own place, this compressor will get put in there, and I will be able to run. I'll probably have maybe 100 amp service go into the building with some serious electric that I can run a plasma cutter and this, because this was my plan for this to run the plasma cutter. I'd like to buy one of those also that's a dual voltage. This is also a dual voltage. It just depends on how you wire it. So unfortunately I can't really run this in here. It just draws too much electricity, but it does turn on, and I actually need to grease one of the mowers here with the pneumatic grease gun. So I'll hit the button here and you guys will see him. It's pretty slow starting up, if it'll even start at all. And watch the lights. The lights will flicker the whole time this thing is running. So it fires up there and runs just fine. This motor runs very, very smooth, and I'm very pleased with this motor so far. So I could maybe loosen up the belts, and that would allow it to spin easier. I don't really know, but it is pumping up air. Well, there you go. That's how I welded some lifting points onto this air compressor. Should make this thing, you know, if you have to load it up into a pickup truck or move it around for whatever reason from one building to another, we can just come over here with the crane and pick her right up and right into the trailer. So hope everyone enjoyed this video. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below, and we will see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching.